Hello everyone, my name is Christian Ardondo, and today we're going to discuss whether you should overclock. So we're going to start by asking, what is overclocking? Well, overclocking is the act of increasing a component's clock rate, which is essentially running it at a higher rate than it was designed for. Most people refer to the CPU when discussing overclocking. However, components such as RAM, GPUs, or SSDs can also be overclocked. And for the sake of this presentation, we're going to mainly focus on CPUs and GPUs. So there's going to be a couple things you're going to want to consider before overclocking. For example, you want to make sure that the PC component that you want to overclock can be overclocked. Some Intel CPUs can't be overclocked, so that's going to be something you want to keep in mind. Overclocking may void the warranty for the PC component that you plan on overclocking. So you're going to want to check with the manufacturer to see if overclocking will void that warranty. And by increasing the voltage needed for overclocking, more heat is going to be generated from that overclock component. And with that being said, you want to make sure that you have sufficient airflow within your PC case, as well as proper cooling solutions applied to the component that you plan on overclocking. And of course, you want to make sure you have a proper power supply unit that can supply the extra voltage to the component that you're going to overclock. And the overclocking process can be time consuming, so you're going to want to make sure that you have some time set aside in order to configure overclock settings. Now there's a couple ways that you can set some cooling methods for overclocking. There's going to be air cooling via heatsink and fans, and then there's water cooling via all-in-one cooler or closed loop. Right here we have an Intel i7-8700K being cooled with a heatsink and fan from Noctua. And then right here we have an AMD Ryzen 9 5950X being cooled by an all-in-one cooler by NZXT. And there's a couple extreme cooling methods for overclocking. We've got dry ice, liquid nitrogen, and liquid helium solutions. We're going to see an example of that right here.
So this is really cool. Last year we spoke with Kingpin.
So this is going to be a liquid nitrogen PC setup. You're definitely not going to see this too often in a home user's PC build, but for the overclocking enthusiasts, this may very well be a solution that you'd go with. This is just to give you an idea of the cooling solutions that are out there. And there are a couple ways to overclock a CPU. If you're using an unlocked Intel CPU, you can use Intel's Extreme Tuning utility. If you're using an unlocked AMD CPU, then you can use the AMD Ryzen Master utility. And of course, for either CPU, you can configure them manually within the motherboard's BIOS. And this is an example of the Intel Extreme Tuning utility's graphical user interface. And this is going to be the simplified version of AMD's Ryzen Master, and this is going to be the more advanced graphical user interface for AMD Ryzen Master. And this is going to be an example of the BIOS, where you'll see the CPU clock settings right in here. And this particular example is in gigabyte. And there's a couple ways to overclock a GPU. You could use MSI Afterburner, EVGA Precision, and ASUS GPU Tweak. And some people kind of wonder if they should overclock for gaming. You'll definitely gain a boost in performance for frames per second after overclocking your CPU, GPU, or both. Some video games are more GPU intensive than CPU intensive, so that's going to be something that you're going to want to keep in mind before you overclock one of those components. And then sometimes the boost in performance isn't very much for the casual gamer to notice, so this may be more important for an esports athlete to overclock, since each frame is going to be very important for them, so that's also something to keep in mind. So right here we have a 1660 Ti that is being at the base clock versus the overclock right here, and these are going to be the average frames that you see for these games right here. And of course there's the different settings, but as you can see, there's usually going to be about a 7 to 10 frames per second difference between the base clock and the overclock. And to some people that might not really matter, so they won't really care to overclock, but to others that may very well make the difference to make them decide to overclock. So there's definitely going to be people out there that are wondering if they should overclock if they're rendering videos or doing 3D animations. And so overclocking can definitely decrease render times in applications such as Blender or Adobe Premiere Pro. And we'll see an example of that right here. So right here, we'll see that there's going to be the non-overclocked rig and the overclocked rig. It's the same computer, and this is going to be for the CPU overclock. And as you can see, there's a difference in the render time in minutes for the 3D animation software Blender. Definitely very big difference right here. And then right here, we're going to see GPU overclocked render times with the Blender animation right here, and then Premiere Pro right here, and it's usually like a minute difference, but that can be important if you're editing long videos or if you're animating frame by frame where you're going to be rendering a single frame, in which doing multiple frames is definitely going to take up more time, and that minute can make the difference for your render times. So the takeaway is that overclocking will definitely boost your PC's performance, and you may want to overclock if you feel that difference in performance is worth it to you. And whether you're a gamer or you're using 3D rendering software or you're a content creator, then you should definitely consider giving overclocking a try just to see how you could benefit from it. And I think that it's definitely something worth giving a try regardless of whether or not you use any of those programs. So definitely give it a try.